I remember having a conversation with this guy who gave me these books, and he had a very different approach to economics and history and philosophy than I had at the time. He said, "What is it you want?" I replied, "I just want a just world." So he said, "And how are you going to go about getting that? What are you going to do to bring about a just world?" I said, "Well, we're going to have a redistribution of the wealth." So he said, "Okay, let's imagine that we have a world where we redistribute all the wealth, that everybody has an equal share of the wealth. Is that what's going to make you happy? Is that what's going to make for a just society?" And I said, "Of course, that's going to be exactly what a just society should be, if everyone has the same." And he said, "Okay, let's pretend that we've done just that. You're satisfied now?" I said, "Yes, I'm satisfied." And then he asked, "Well, what happens the next day?" Now, I have to admit, I hadn't thought through to the next day. I said, "So what do you mean, what happens the next day?" And he said, "Well, what does the world look like now that you've redistributed all the wealth?" Now, he says to me, "You've redistributed all of the wealth and everybody has an equal share. And then the next day, what happens? Concretely, what do people do?" I said, "Well, they go about their business." He said, "And what would that be?" I said, "Well, they go to their jobs," and then he stopped me and he said, "No, wait a minute, stop right there. Where do they go to their jobs?" I said, "Well, they go to their industries, their factories, to the work that they had been doing, what they have a competency in." And he said, "And where would that be?" I was honestly befuddled by his question. And he said, "I understand." He said, "You think all this wealth that you've just redistributed exists in the superfluous wealth and the personal wealth of the rich people, that it's their boats and their houses and their clothes and their jewelry and their wine collections, their art collections, and all the rest of it that constitutes wealth." He said, "You think that's what's going to supply the needs of the whole planet." He said, "But people can't just go to work the next day." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Because the vast majority of the wealth of the wealthiest 1% isn't invested in those superfluous things. It's precisely invested in capital. That is to say, it's invested in the industries that you think people are going to go back to and be able to work at. But in fact, they no longer exist because you've redistributed them. That's the wealth. Everybody has that money now." You see, this is the thing that people don't understand on an economic level. The difference between personal property and capital. Personal property is the fish. Capital is the net. And capital, the net, is what Marx was after. The net, not the fish. He didn't care about your toothbrush. That was your private property. That's fine. He's not going to redistribute that. He was interested in the company that produced the toothbrush, or in the toothpaste, the company that produced that. That's what he wanted redistributed and placed in the hands of the state. Now, this was an education. When I began to understand this and consider myself, even at the time I was a non-orthodox Marxist, I was a socialist of some kind, but I had never thought these things through in terms of their consequences. I had all of these good intentions, but I'd never spent any time really thinking through what the consequences would really be.